Two jobs, one dream. Have you ever come home so tired that even your dreams feel heavy? Maybe you work all day, then work again at night, and somewhere between the alarm clock and the microwave dinner, you start wondering why you are still trying. You wanted a better life. You wanted better English. You wanted love, stability, and a future that made sense. But now, standing in America with two jobs and one exhausted heart, you ask yourself a quiet question. Is hope still allowed to live here? When I first came to the United States, I thought hard work would solve everything. That belief felt solid, almost mathematical. Work more, earn more, improve faster. Simple. But America doesn't run on simple. It runs on speed, weather extremes, paperwork, accents, and invisible rules no one explains to you slowly. I worked my first job in the early morning. The air was cold, even in months that were supposed to be warm. Climate in the US hits differently. Winter doesn't just make you cold, it makes you quiet. It slows your body, tightens your shoulders, and somehow makes English sound faster. People speak with their breath half frozen. Words clipped short. Morning. You good? Gotta run. You nod, even when you don't fully understand, because nodding is the safest English sentence. My second job started in the afternoon and ended late at night. Different building, different people, same tired smile. By then, my brain felt like an old phone with too many apps open. Psychologists call this cognitive overload when your working memory is so full that new information just slides off. That's why, even after hours of English exposure, nothing sticks. It's not because you're bad at English. It's because your brain is exhausted. I remember standing on the bus ride home, holding the rail, listening to conversations around me. English everywhere. Real English. Fast, emotional, unfinished. Not the clean sentences from textbooks. Someone complained about rent. Someone joked about the weather changing again tomorrow. I caught words, not meaning. Rent, crazy, snow again. My brain tried to connect them like puzzle pieces from different boxes. This is where many people silently quit, not the job, but the dream. They stop believing their English will ever feel natural. They stop believing love will be easy in a foreign language. They stop believing they belong. And yet, strangely, this was also where my dream became clearer. I didn't come to America just to survive. I came to build something human. A relationship. A family. A version of myself who could speak, listen, and love without translating every feeling in my head first. But working two jobs meant my days were practical and my nights were empty. That emptiness is dangerous. Neuroscience tells us the brain hates emptiness almost as much as pain. When meaning disappears, motivation follows. So I started doing something small and slightly ridiculous. On my way home, instead of forcing myself to understand everything, I chose one sentence. Just one. Something simple like, I'm just tired, man. I repeated it quietly. I imagined when I could say it naturally. Not perfectly. Naturally. This is called contextual repetition, learning language inside emotion, not drills. Research shows the brain remembers stories and feelings far better than isolated words. At the same time, I noticed something else. Love doesn't wait for perfect grammar. In break rooms, people shared snacks. Someone asked if I was okay when I looked too quiet. These were small acts, but they mattered. Human connection reduces stress hormones like cortisol, which directly improves language processing. In simple words, when you feel safe, English slows down. I began to believe that maybe working 2 jobs wasn't the end of the story. Maybe it was the setting. Many love stories don't start in beautiful places. They start in exhaustion, in borrowed apartments, in silence after long shifts. America, with all its cultural rules and climate shocks, doesn't soften the struggle. But it does reveal who you are when no one is watching. There were nights I questioned everything. Marriage felt far away. Family felt like a memory on another continent. English felt like a wall. But walls are interesting things. Neuroscience says the brain rewires itself when it repeatedly hits difficulty and sees meaning beyond it. Hope is not optimism. Hope is endurance with a reason. My reason was simple. I wanted a life where English didn't scare me. Where love wasn't postponed until I improve. Where 2 jobs were temporary, not my identity. I didn't need to win fast. I needed to stay. So if you're listening to this while tired, while doubting yourself, while wondering why your English still feels slow, let me say this clearly. Slowness is not failure. It is how deep learning begins. Your brain is not broken. It's adapting. Quietly. Patiently. Just like you. And maybe, just maybe, working 2 jobs while still believing in love isn't foolish at all. Maybe it's proof that hope hasn't given up on you yet. Climate shock in America. Nobody tells you that weather can change who you are. They talk about jobs, visas, English, and money, but climate? Climate feels like a background detail. Something you check on your phone. Then you arrive in America, step outside, and realize the air itself has opinions about you. The first winter I experienced in the US wasn't just cold. It was personal. The wind didn't ask where you came from or how hard you worked. It cut through your jacket, your confidence, and your carefully practiced English sentences. Your mouth stiffened. Your pronunciation changed. Suddenly, words that were fine yesterday felt heavy today. Linguists know this. Cold temperatures reduce facial muscle flexibility, which subtly affects pronunciation and listening accuracy. You didn't forget English. Your body just entered survival mode. Climate in America is dramatic. One week it's bright and hopeful, the next it's gray and endless. This matters more than people admit. Seasonal changes directly affect mood through sunlight exposure and vitamin D levels. Less sunlight means lower serotonin. Lower serotonin means lower motivation. That's why, in winter, your English practice feels harder, your listening feels faster, and your self-talk becomes crueler. You start saying things like, maybe I'm just not good at languages. No. You're cold, tired, and underlit. I remember walking to my morning job before sunrise. The sky was dark blue, almost metallic. Snow hadn't fallen yet, but it was coming. Americans call this brutal weather casually, like it's an annoying coworker. For immigrants, it's a psychological event. Your brain already works overtime translating culture. Add extreme climate, and it drains faster. Cognitive scientists call this environmental stress load, when surroundings consume mental energy you thought you had for learning. At work, people chatted about the weather constantly. Crazy cold. Right? Wait till February. You'll get used to it. That phrase, "you'll get used to it," sounds comforting, but it hides a truth. Adaptation takes time, and during that time, you feel broken. Your listening skills dip. Your speaking confidence shrinks. You start avoiding conversations, not because you don't care, but because your brain is protecting itself from overload. Then summer arrives, and it's not gentle either. Heat in some parts of America is aggressive. Air conditioners hum everywhere, creating artificial climates indoors. You walk from hot streets into freezing stores. Your body never stabilizes. Research shows frequent temperature shifts increase fatigue and reduce short-term memory performance. Again, not an English problem. A nervous system problem. Here's the part no textbook teaches you. Climate affects culture. In colder regions, people speak faster and shorter. In hotter places, conversations stretch out, slower, more expressive. When you move between regions or even seasons, you're not just adjusting to weather. You're adjusting to a new rhythm of English. This confused me deeply at first. In winter, coworkers felt distant. Less small talk. More efficiency. I thought they didn't like me. In summer, the same people joked more, lingered longer, spoke softer. Same English. Different climate. Different social temperature. Psychology explains this through behavioral adaptation. Humans unconsciously mirror the environment. Cold creates inward focus. Warmth creates openness. Understanding this changed how I listened. I stopped taking tone personally. I stopped assuming my English level dropped overnight. I realized the environment was speaking too. To cope, I started anchoring my English practice to the climate. Instead of fighting it. On cold mornings, I listened to slow, calm stories, nothing aggressive, nothing fast. This matches what neuroscientists call state-dependent learning. Your brain learns best when the emotional state matches the input. Calm weather, calm input. Stressful weather, grounding input. On hot days, I practiced speaking out loud while walking. Heat already raised my energy. So I used it. Short sentences. Real thoughts. It's too hot today. I miss quiet mornings. English became part of my body, not just my head. Climate also affected my emotional life, and love doesn't survive emotional numbness easily. When you're constantly uncomfortable, patience shrinks. Misunderstandings grow. Small arguments feel bigger. Add language barriers, and suddenly weather becomes a third person in your relationship. There were days I snapped, not because of words, but because my system was overloaded. Later, I learned that emotional regulation weakens under physical stress. This matters for immigrants. You're not emotionally unstable. You're climate fatigued. Once I saw this, I stopped blaming myself. I adjusted expectations. Winter was for listening and reflection. Summer was for speaking and connection. English stopped being a rigid goal and became seasonal, flexible, human. America doesn't just test your skills. It tests your nervous system. And when your nervous system feels safe, your English follows. Slowly. Naturally. So if your progress feels uneven, ask yourself a kinder question. Is it really about discipline, or is your body adapting to a new world? Because sometimes, surviving the climate is already a form of fluency. Lost in everyday English. There's a special kind of loneliness that happens when people are talking to you, but not really with you. You're standing there, smiling at the right moments, nodding like a professional agreement machine while your brain quietly panics. You know these words. You've studied them. But when they arrive in real life fast, bent, unfinished, they refuse to line up into meaning. This is everyday English. And it is nothing like the English you prepared for. I remember my first grocery store conversations. Simple place. Bright lights. Friendly cashier. Then comes the sentence, "Did you find everything okay?" I froze. My brain searched for grammar. Found, everything okay? By the time I answered, the moment had passed. I smiled. I said yes. That became my universal survival word. Yes for confusion. Yes for fear. Yes for please don't ask another question. Linguists call this processing delay, the gap between hearing language and understanding it in real time. In textbooks, you control the speed. In real life, English doesn't wait for you to catch up. It assumes you already belong. At work, it was worse. Coworkers didn't speak in full sentences. They spoke in fragments, jokes, shared context. You know how it is. Same old. He's one of those. Those words rely on cultural memory. Without it, you're decoding blind. Cognitive science explains this as missing schemas, mental frameworks that native speakers build over years. You're not slow. You're just new. I used to replay conversations on the bus ride home. My brain worked overtime, reconstructing what just happened. Suddenly, everything made sense too late. This delayed clarity is brutal. It tricks you into believing you could understand English. Just not when it matters. That gap hurts confidence more than mistakes ever could. And here's the quiet danger. When understanding feels unreliable, you start avoiding interaction. You speak less. You listen passively. You shrink. Neuroscience shows that avoidance reinforces fear pathways in the brain. The less you engage, the scarier English feels. Not because it's hard, but because your brain learned to associate it with stress. I hit that wall hard. One night, after a long shift, a coworker joked with me. Everyone laughed. I laughed too, half a second late. On the way home, I finally understood the joke. It wasn't even that funny. But I felt something heavier than embarrassment. I felt excluded by time itself. That night, I stopped trying to understand everything. Instead, I changed the goal. I aimed for one real moment per day. One sentence I truly caught. One emotion I recognized in English. Research on language acquisition supports this approach. Comprehensible input works best when it's slightly above your level, not overwhelming. Everyday English overwhelms because it's layered with culture, speed, and assumption. So I simplified my world. I listened for tone, not words. Was the voice relaxed? Rushed? Annoyed? Emotional cues travel faster than vocabulary. Your brain processes them instinctively. This gave me context. Context gave me confidence. Confidence slowed my panic. And suddenly, English slowed down too. I also started telling myself stories in English, simple ones. Not dramatic. Just honest. I am tired today. This job is heavy. I still want love. Speaking to yourself activates neural pathways without social pressure. Psychologists call this private speech, and it's how children build fluency long before perfection. Everyday English stopped being an enemy when I stopped treating it like a test. It's messy because life is messy. People interrupt themselves. They trail off. They expect you to know things you don't. That's not cruelty. That's familiarity. And you earn familiarity by staying. There was a moment that changed everything. A coworker asked, "Long day?" Normally, I would say yes and escape. That day, I paused and said, slowly, "Yeah. 2 jobs. Kinda tired." It wasn't elegant, but it was real. The coworker nodded. "I get that." 3 words. "I get that." Understanding arrived on time. That's when I realized something important. Fluency isn't speed. It's timing. It's when meaning lands while the moment is still alive. And that only happens when you allow yourself to be imperfect out loud. So if everyday English makes you feel lost, let me offer you this truth. You are not behind. You are inside the process. Confusion is not failure, it's evidence that your brain is mapping a new world. Stay in the conversation, even if you don't fully understand it yet. Meaning has a habit of catching up. Culture gaps everywhere. Imagine playing a game where everyone knows the rules, but no one tells you what they are. They just smile, move quickly, and look slightly confused when you make a mistake. That's what American culture felt like at first. Not hostile. Just assumed. The biggest shock wasn't language. It was silence. In my home culture, silence often means tension or sadness. In America, silence can mean respect, privacy, or simply, "I'm busy." When I first noticed this, it hurt. Coworkers didn't ask personal questions. Neighbors waved but didn't stop to talk. People said, "How are you?" and kept walking. My brain tried to translate it emotionally and failed. Psychologists call this high-context versus low-context culture. Many immigrants come from high-context cultures where meaning is shared, indirect, and relational. America leans low-context, direct, efficient, individual-focused. English here doesn't carry hidden warmth the same way. It expects clarity, not closeness. At work, this difference caused quiet disasters. I once waited weeks for feedback, assuming silence meant things were fine. In American culture, silence often means nothing is being discussed, not that approval exists. When feedback finally came, it felt sudden and harsh. Not because it was cruel, but because I wasn't prepared. Culture also shows up in time. Americans are obsessed with it. Meetings start on time. Breaks end on time. Love, somehow, is also scheduled. Let's plan something next week. Next week arrives, and plans disappear. At first, I took this personally. I thought I said something wrong. I thought my English failed. But sociology explains this through time orientation. In the US, time is seen as a resource to manage, not a relationship to maintain. Canceling plans isn't rejection, it's logistics. Understanding this saved my self-esteem. Then there's the culture of independence. Americans value self-reliance deeply. Asking for help can feel like weakness to them and to you. I struggled with this. In my culture, sharing problems builds connection. In America, oversharing can make people uncomfortable. I learned this the hard way after telling a coworker about my exhaustion. They listened politely, then created distance. Not because they didn't care, but because emotional boundaries are guarded. Here. This affects English learning more than you think. When you don't feel emotionally safe, your brain tightens. Neurobiology shows that stress reduces access to language centers. You speak less. You simplify too much. You retreat. Love, too, lives inside culture. Dating felt strange. Direct questions. Clear boundaries. What are we? Came early. Romance here is practical. Efficient. It doesn't linger in ambiguity. That clashed with my expectations. I wanted slow discovery. They wanted clarity. Neither was wrong. Just different. Misunderstandings piled up. Small ones. Text messages that felt cold. Conversations that ended too quickly. I blamed my English. But often, the issue wasn't words, it was cultural rhythm. So I started observing instead of judging. Observation is powerful. Anthropologists use it to survive new societies. I watched how Americans expressed care. They didn't ask many questions, but they showed up on time. They didn't talk deeply, but they followed through. Reliability was love, just expressed differently. I also learned to adjust my English accordingly. Shorter sentences. Clear requests. Direct feelings. This isn't dumbing down language. It's aligning with cultural expectations. Studies show language is processed more positively when it matches social norms. Suddenly, people responded better. Not because my English improved, but because my fit did. Culture gaps don't disappear. You learn to step over them. Some days you misstep. Some days you nail it. That's normal. The danger is believing every awkward moment is your fault. It's not. America doesn't require you to erase who you are. It requires you to translate yourself, not just linguistically, but culturally. That takes patience, and humility, and forgiveness toward yourself. Once I stopped fighting the gaps, they became bridges. And across those bridges, real connection began to form. Love while exhausted. Love doesn't announce itself when your life is stable. It shows up when your body hurts, your English feels unfinished, and your future looks like a spreadsheet you don't know how to balance. That's the inconvenient truth no romantic movie prepares you for. Love often arrives when you are too tired to feel poetic about it. I met love while working 2 jobs. Not in a dramatic way. No sparks, no perfect timing. Just 2 people sitting across from each other, both exhausted, both trying to look normal. When you're tired like that, your brain operates in energy-saving mode. Neuroscientists call this decision fatigue, when mental resources are so low that even small choices feel heavy. That's why love, at this stage, doesn't feel exciting. It feels confusing. Our conversations were simple. Sometimes painfully simple. How was work? Busy. You okay? Yeah. Underneath those short answers lived entire emotional novels. But English didn't give me access to all my feelings yet. And exhaustion didn't give me the courage to try. Here's something nobody tells you. Emotional expression requires energy. When you're physically drained, your ability to process and communicate feelings drops sharply. Studies show that sleep deprivation reduces empathy and emotional accuracy. So when misunderstandings happened, they felt bigger than they were. A quiet reply sounded cold. A missed message felt personal. Love becomes fragile when everyone is tired. Add culture into the mix and things get even messier. In American culture, Independence is respected. People don't check in constantly. They assume space equals trust. In my emotional system, space felt like distance. My brain tried to fill the silence with fear. Did I say something wrong? Is my English bad? Am I too much? This is where many relationships break. Not because love isn't there, but because exhaustion distorts perception. Psychologists call this negative bias under stress. The brain interprets neutral events as negative when overloaded. You're not seeing reality. You're seeing fatigue. There were nights we argued over nothing. Dishes. Time. Tone. English made it worse. When emotions rise, language complexity drops. Even native speakers struggle. For learners, it's brutal. You know what you feel, but the sentence comes out flat or sharp. Then the other person reacts to the tone, not the intention. One night, after a long shift, I said something wrong. Not rude. Just wrong. The silence afterward was heavy. I went home questioning everything. Love. English. Myself. But then something small happened. A message arrived. Simple. I know you're tired. Me too. That sentence did more than apologize. It regulated my nervous system. Science explains why. When someone acknowledges your state, your brain releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone. Stress lowers. Language centers reopen. Safety returns. Love in exhaustion survives through recognition, not romance. We started doing something unintentionally smart. We lowered expectations. Not of commitment, but of expression. We stopped trying to have deep conversations when we were depleted. Instead, we saved them for moments of rest. Weekends. Walks. Quiet mornings. This aligns with research on emotional timing. Difficult conversations land better when the body is regulated. English became part of that adjustment. I learned that I didn't need perfect sentences to express care. I'm tired, but I care. I need quiet, not distance. Simple language. Clear intention. Love doesn't need complexity. It needs clarity. Working 2 jobs meant time was limited. So we learned to be intentional. Short check-ins. Honest pauses. No pretending energy we didn't have. That honesty built trust faster than charm ever could. There's a myth that love should energize you. Sometimes it does. But sometimes, love asks you to stay when you're empty. To communicate gently when your brain wants to shut down. To believe the other person's intention even when your nervous system is screaming. I realized something important during that phase. Loving while exhausted is not a weakness. It's a skill. One built through patience, self-awareness, and forgiveness, especially toward yourself. If you're listening to this and thinking, I'm too tired for love right now, let me tell you something quietly. You don't need to be at your best. You need to be honest about your limits. Love can work with that. Because sometimes, the most powerful sentence in a relationship isn't poetic at all. It's simply, I'm exhausted, but I'm still here. Marriage under pressure. Marriage doesn't begin with a kiss. In America, it begins with paperwork, deadlines, fees, and decisions that sound romantic only if you've never filled out a government form in a second language. When love turns official, pressure arrives quietly, wearing the mask of responsibility. I didn't realize how heavy marriage would feel until it stopped being an idea and started being a system. Health insurance, taxes, schedules. Legal language that assumes English is your first language and emotional stability is permanent. The moment you sign something, your relationship becomes part of an institution. And institutions don't slow down for feelings. Psychologists talk about role strain, when the expectations of a role exceed your emotional or cognitive resources. Marriage adds roles instantly. Partner, provider, planner, communicator. If you're an immigrant, add translator, adapter, and emotional bridge. That's a lot for one nervous system. We loved each other, but pressure tested everything. Small disagreements felt like threats. Money conversations carried cultural weight. In my background, finances were shared emotionally. In America, they are discussed practically. Budgets, percentages, plans. None of it was cold, but all of it felt unfamiliar. English made it sharper. Emotional vocabulary is harder than professional. English. You can explain your job before you can explain your fear. That gap caused tension. I knew something was wrong inside me, but I couldn't name it clearly. Studies show that unlabeled emotions intensify stress. When you can't name what you feel, your body stays in alarm mode. There were moments when marriage felt less like partnership and more like endurance training. You wake up tired. You plan. You compromise. You repeat. Love exists, but it's buried under logistics. This is where many couples think something is broken. It isn't. Marriage under pressure exposes patterns you didn't know you had. How you react to uncertainty. How you handle conflict. How your culture taught you to ask, or not ask, for support. In the US, couples are expected to communicate directly. Say what you need. That sounds simple until you realize you don't know how to say it in this cultural language. I noticed something else. Stress made me interpret neutral actions as rejection. A late reply felt dismissive. A practical tone felt cold. Neuroscience calls this threat bias. Under stress, the brain scans for danger, even in safe relationships. Knowing this didn't fix everything, but it softened my reactions. We began learning each other's stress languages. Some people need to talk. Others need silence. Some need reassurance. Others need space. These differences aren't personality flaws. They're regulation strategies. Marriage works better when you stop demanding one style and start translating between them. English practice entered our marriage in an unexpected way. We started using simple check-in sentences. What's heavy today? Do you need help or listening? These questions reduce misunderstanding by clarifying intention. Communication. Research shows that explicit framing lowers conflict because it removes guesswork. There were nights we failed. Arguments ended badly. Silence stretched too long. But something kept us coming back to the table. Not passion. Commitment. The quiet decision to stay curious instead of defensive. American marriage culture often emphasizes independence. You don't complete me. That's healthy, but it can also hide loneliness. I learned that partnership here means choosing interdependence consciously. Asking for help without shame. Accepting support without guilt. These are learned skills, not instincts. Pressure didn't disappear. Bills still came. English still lagged behind emotions. But we stopped seeing pressure as a sign of incompatibility. We saw it as context. Temporary. Manageable. Marriage under pressure isn't glamorous. It's built in tired conversations, repeated apologies, and shared calendars. But it's real. And real things grow stronger when handled gently. If you're feeling strained in your relationship while learning English, working too much, or adjusting to a new country, hear this clearly. Pressure doesn't mean failure. It means weight. And weight can be shared. Love doesn't collapse under pressure when both people learn how to breathe together. Family far, kids growing. Distance changes the shape of love. It stretches it thin, then asks it to hold anyway. When your family lives on another continent, love becomes scheduled. Calls, blurry video screens, and memories that feel warmer than your current weather. And when you start building a family of your own in America, that distance grows teeth. I didn't feel it at first. I was busy. 2 jobs. English. Marriage. Survival leaves little room for reflection. But then children enter the picture and time suddenly accelerates. Kids don't wait for you to feel ready. They grow in inches, questions, and opinions. And they grow in English. The first time my child corrected my pronunciation, it wasn't cruel. It was innocent, helpful, and devastating. Not because they were wrong, but because the hierarchy had shifted. Language is power. And suddenly, my child had more of it in this country than I did. Psychologists call this role reversal stress. Parents expect to guide. When children become translators, cultural navigators, or emotional bridges, something inside the parent tightens. You feel proud and ashamed at the same time. Proud they're adapting. Ashamed you're lagging. At home, English became the default. Not because we wanted it to replace anything, but because school demanded it. Friends demanded it. Life demanded it. I noticed my child thinking in English, dreaming in English, expressing frustration in English. Meanwhile, my emotional language still lived somewhere else. This gap creates quiet. Grief. You love your child fiercely, but sometimes you don't recognize the cultural references they bring home. Jokes. Songs. School rules. You nod, like you used to at work. That nod returns this. Time inside your own house. Science explains why this hurts so deeply. Family is where the nervous system expects safety without effort. When communication requires effort again, stress rises. You're not weak for feeling this. Your brain is responding to unexpected labor in a space meant for rest. Meanwhile, your parents back home age through a screen. Time zones steal spontaneity. You calculate calls. You translate your life into short updates. We're fine. Work is busy. You hide the complexity because explaining it in another language, across distance, feels impossible. Guilt settles in. Immigrant guilt is specific. You left for opportunity, but opportunity costs connection. You tell yourself it's worth it, but guilt doesn't respond to logic. It responds to loss. I noticed something important during this phase. When I felt disconnected from my family, past and present, my English motivation dipped. Emotional security fuels learning. When your heart feels divided, focus fractures. So I adjusted again. I stopped trying to be perfect in 2 worlds. Instead, I aimed to be present in moments. With my child, I practiced English through shared routines. Bedtime stories. Simple conversations. Repetition without pressure. Research shows joint attention, learning through shared focus, accelerates language development for both children and adults. I let my child teach me words, not as authority, but as play. This reframed the power dynamic. It became bonding, not correction. Laughter returned. So did patience. With my family back home, I stopped summarizing my life. I started telling small stories. One moment. One feeling. Stories travel better than reports. They carry emotion across distance. They reminded me who I was before. Survival mode took over. Family, I learned, doesn't disappear with distance. It transforms. And transformation is uncomfortable. But it's also growth. Children growing in a new culture aren't leaving you behind. They're building a bridge forward. Walking that bridge requires humility and courage and forgiveness for your accent, your slowness, your fatigue. If you're feeling torn between generations, languages, and identities, know this. You are not failing either side. You are holding both. And that is hard work. Family love stretches. It doesn't break easily. Even when oceans, languages, and time zones pull at it. English as survival tool. You don't notice the moment English stops being a subject and starts being a shield. It happens quietly, usually when something goes wrong. A bill you don't understand. A school email that feels urgent. A doctor speaking too fast. Suddenly, English isn't about improvement or confidence. It's about protection. For a long time, I treated English like homework. Something to do after work when energy allowed. But survival doesn't wait for convenient schedules. It shows up at the worst possible times when your brain is tired and your emotions are already stretched thin. I remember receiving a letter that changed how I saw language. Official. Dense. Full of words that looked familiar but behaved differently together. My heart raced. The body reacts to threat before the mind understands it. Neuroscience calls this amygdala hijack, when fear takes over processing. In that state, your English level drops instantly. Not because you forgot, but because your nervous system shut down access. That's when I realized something uncomfortable. In America, English isn't just communication. It's access. To healthcare. To education. To fairness. To dignity. When you don't fully control it, vulnerability increases. I stopped romanticizing fluency. I started respecting functionality. Survival English isn't fancy. It's clear. It's direct. It asks questions. It slows people down. Can you explain that again? I don't understand this part. These sentences saved me more than any advanced vocabulary ever did. Psychologists emphasize perceived control as a key factor in reducing stress. The moment you believe you can ask, clarify, and pause a situation, your body calms. English becomes a tool instead of a threat. I practiced English differently after that. Not with grammar drills, but with scenarios. Calling an office. Talking to a teacher. Asking for help. Role-playing may sound childish, but research shows simulation-based learning activates the same neural pathways as real experience. The brain doesn't care if the danger is imagined. It learns anyway. This shift changed my confidence. I didn't need to sound native. I needed to sound clear. I learned to prioritize verbs over adjectives. Meaning over style. Survival doesn't reward elegance. It rewards precision. Love and family were part of this too. When you can explain your needs, boundaries, and fears clearly, relationships stabilize. Misunderstanding drops. Safety rises. English stopped being about impressing anyone. It became about protecting what mattered. I also learned that listening is survival. Not passive listening, but strategic listening. Identifying keywords. Ignoring filler. Asking follow-up questions. Cognitive science shows that focused listening reduces mental load. You're not trying to understand everything, just enough to act. There were still moments of fear. Emergencies don't disappear. But my response changed. Instead of freezing, I engaged. Slower. Calmer. Present. That's the real upgrade. Not accent. Not speed. Agency. If you're learning English and feel pressure to sound perfect, let that go. Survival English is powerful because it's honest. It doesn't hide confusion. It names it. And naming fear reduces its grip. You don't need to master English to survive in America, but you do need to use it daily, imperfectly, bravely. English, in the end, didn't save me because I learned it well. It saved me because I learned to use it when it mattered. Learning through stories. At some point, your brain gets tired of being corrected. Not by teachers, not by apps, but by reality itself. Every mistake feels recorded. Every pause feels judged. That's when traditional studying quietly stops working. Your brain doesn't want more rules. It wants relief. That's when stories saved my English. I didn't plan it. I didn't read research papers first. I was just exhausted. After 2 jobs, after family responsibilities, after constant translation in my head, I couldn't handle another grammar explanation. My nervous system wanted something human. Something slow. Something that didn't test me. So I started telling myself stories. Simple ones. Real ones. My own. Not heroic stories. Ordinary ones. A long shift. A quiet bus ride. A conversation that didn't go well. I told them in English, not perfectly, not fluently, but honestly. And something unexpected happened. My brain stayed open. Neuroscience explains this beautifully. Stories activate multiple areas of the brain at once: language, emotion, memory, and imagination. This is called neural coupling. When information arrives as a story, the brain doesn't treat it like data. It treats it like experience. Experience sticks. Textbook English felt like weightlifting for my mind. Story-based English felt like walking. Sustainable. Natural. Repeatable. I noticed that when I listened to stories, especially slow, personal ones, my comprehension increased without effort. I wasn't translating. I was following. Psycholinguists call this narrative transportation. When you're emotionally engaged, your brain predicts meaning instead of decoding every word. That's how native speakers listen. They don't hear every word. They follow the story. This changed how I practiced. I stopped chasing new vocabulary and started revisiting familiar language in new emotional contexts. Same words, different feelings. That repetition built depth, not just recognition. Research shows that emotional variability strengthens memory far more than novelty alone. I told stories while cooking, while walking, while lying in bed, half asleep. No pressure. No timer. Sometimes I whispered. Sometimes I spoke aloud. Private speech again, safe, forgiving, powerful. And here's the part people underestimate. Stories gave me my voice back. Not accent. Voice. I wasn't borrowing sentences anymore. I was generating meaning. That's when English stopped feeling foreign and started feeling personal. Stories also helped with speaking fear. When you tell a story, pauses feel natural. Hesitation sounds thoughtful, not weak. You're allowed to breathe. That permission calms the nervous system. When the nervous system is calm, fluency increases. It's biology, not talent. I began sharing small stories with others. Not performances. Just moments. Yesterday was hard. My kid said something funny. People leaned in. Stories invite listening. They create connection faster than perfect grammar ever could. This mattered for love too. Emotional stories bridged gaps English couldn't. I didn't need advanced words to express vulnerability. I needed sequence. Beginning. Middle. Feeling. That structure exists in every language. Your brain already knows it. Slow storytelling became my method. Not because I wanted to learn slowly, but because my brain needed safety. And safety accelerates learning. Studies confirm this. Low-stress environments increase language acquisition efficiency. Calm doesn't slow you down. Panic does. If you're struggling with English right now, ask yourself this gently. When was the last time you learned something through a story instead of a rule? You don't need harder material. You need meaningful material. Stories give you that. Especially your own. English through stories isn't a shortcut. It's a return to how humans have always learned. Around fires. On long walks. Through shared struggle. Your life already contains the curriculum. You just have to tell it. Science of slow listening. Your brain was never designed for speed. It was designed for survival, pattern recognition, and meaning. Speed came later, packaged as productivity. So when people tell you that real English is fast, what they're really saying is that your brain should work in a way it was never meant to. I learned this the hard way, by failing at fast listening again and again. Podcasts at normal speed felt like noise. Movies without subtitles felt like chaos. I blamed my intelligence, my discipline, my age. But neuroscience tells a different story. Listening is not passive. It's one of the most energy-demanding tasks the brain performs. You're decoding sound, predicting meaning, filtering noise, and managing emotion at the same time. That's a lot for a tired immigrant brain. Cognitive scientists explain this through processing speed versus processing depth. Fast listening rewards surface recognition. Slow listening builds structure. When you slow down input, you give the brain time to form neural connections. Without that time, information passes through without leaving a trace. This is why slow listening works, even for advanced learners. Especially for advanced learners who are stuck. Speed hides gaps. Slowness reveals them gently. I started experimenting. I chose audio that felt almost boring. Clear voices. Long pauses. Everyday topics. At first, my ego resisted. This felt too easy. But learning isn't about difficulty. It's about retention. Studies show that comprehension improves dramatically when input speed matches working memory capacity. I noticed something else. When audio slowed down, my inner critic quieted. I stopped panicking. My body relaxed. That relaxation mattered more than the content itself. The brain learns best when it feels safe. Stress hormones block memory formation. Calm opens the door. Slow listening also changed how I spoke. My sentences became cleaner. Not shorter, clearer. I stopped rushing to fill silence. Silence became part of communication. Native speakers do this naturally. Pauses aren't weakness. They're punctuation. There's a myth that to sound fluent, you must speak quickly. In reality, fluency is about flow, not speed. Flow requires timing. Timing requires listening. Slow listening trains timing. I applied this everywhere. Conversations. TV. Real life. I allowed myself to miss parts without quitting. I listened for intention, not perfection. Over time, my brain began predicting language more accurately. Prediction is the core of listening comprehension. When predictions improve, speed follows automatically. This is supported by predictive processing theory. The brain is a prediction machine. It guesses what comes next based on patterns. Slow listening strengthens those patterns. Fast listening just tests them. I also noticed emotional benefits. Slow listening reduced anxiety. I felt less stupid, less behind. That emotional shift mattered. Self-trust returned. And self-trust fuels consistency. For B1 to C2 learners, this is critical. At higher levels, the problem isn't vocabulary. It's overload. Too much input, too fast, with no integration. Slow listening integrates. I paired slow listening with stories, real ones, personal ones. This layered meaning on top of sound. Memory deepened. Speaking improved without direct practice. That's how the brain works. Skills don't develop in isolation. If you feel stuck, don't push harder. Pull slower. Let your brain breathe. Let meaning land. Slow listening isn't laziness. It's precision. It's respect for how learning actually happens. Train your ears like a native, not by racing, but by understanding. Hope between long shifts. Hope doesn't show up loudly when you're exhausted. It doesn't give speeches. It doesn't clap. Most days, it barely whispers. Hope hides between shifts, between the end of one job and the beginning of another, when your body wants to quit, but something inside you refuses to fully collapse. This was the hardest phase. Not the beginning, not the shock, not the confusion, but the long middle. The part no one films. When life doesn't feel tragic enough to cry, but not hopeful enough to celebrate. Just repetitive. Just heavy. I woke up early. I worked. I worked again. I came home. I slept. Repeat. In that loop, motivation fades quietly. Psychologists call this learned fatigue, when the brain stops expecting reward, even if effort continues. It's dangerous because it feels logical. Why try harder if nothing changes? That question sounds reasonable. But it's not the truth. It's exhaustion speaking. English practice during this phase felt pointless. Love felt distant. Dreams felt childish. And yet, something small kept happening. Tiny improvements. Barely noticeable. I understood a joke in real time. I responded without rehearsing. I expressed frustration without shutting down. These moments didn't change my life, but they changed my trajectory. Neuroscience shows that progress often happens below conscious awareness. This is called implicit learning. Your brain absorbs patterns quietly, without celebration. That's why breakthroughs feel sudden. They aren't. They're delayed recognition. Between shifts, I stopped forcing progress and started protecting consistency. 5 minutes of listening. One short story. One honest sentence spoken aloud. Not heroic. Sustainable. Consistency sends a powerful signal to the brain. This matters. And the brain responds by allocating resources. Hope, I learned, is not optimism. It's permission to continue without guarantees. There were nights I questioned my relationship, my choices, my identity. Immigrant life compresses everything: career, language, love, into one pressure point. When something hurts, everything hurts. But long-term studies on resilience show that people don't survive because they feel strong. They survive because they keep routines during weakness. So I kept going. Not blindly. Gently. I reframe success. Not fluent English. But less fear today. Not perfect marriage. But honest conversation. Not escape exhaustion. But understand it. That shift matters. The brain responds better to achievable goals. Dopamine, the motivation chemical, releases when progress feels reachable. Grand goals starve motivation. Small wins feed it. Between long shifts, love looked different too. Not passion. Partnership. Sharing silence without panic. Understanding that tiredness wasn't rejection. That staying was an act of devotion. Hope lived there. In unglamorous moments. In showing up again. If you're in that middle right now, working hard, learning slowly, loving imperfectly, hear this. You are not stuck. You are building depth. And depth takes time. The world celebrates speed. But meaning grows quietly. Stay. Still believing in love. There is a moment, quiet, almost invisible, when you realize you didn't quit. Not dramatically. Not proudly. You just stayed. Through the long shifts. Through the misunderstandings. Through the English that arrived slowly, word by word, emotion by emotion. One day you look back, and the life that once felt temporary has weight, shape, meaning. This is not a story about winning. It's a story about not leaving yourself behind. By the time I noticed change, it had already happened. English no longer attacked me in public spaces. It still challenged me, but it didn't humiliate me. I could listen without panic. I could speak without rehearsing every sentence in my head. I still made mistakes, but they didn't define the interaction. That's what real progress looks like. Not perfection. Resilience. Psychologists call this identity integration, the stage where new skills stop feeling like performance and start feeling like part of who you are. Language becomes an extension of self, not a mask. And when that happens, something else changes too. Love stabilizes. Not the movie version. The durable version. The kind that survives stress, exhaustion, cultural confusion, and quiet fear. The kind built on shared understanding instead of constant explanation. Marriage stopped feeling like a test and started feeling like a rhythm. Family life felt less divided between languages and more layered. Children grew. English became natural for them. Instead of seeing that as loss, I learned to see it as expansion. They weren't replacing anything. They were adding to it. And I was adding too, slowly, imperfectly, but honestly. Looking back, the hardest part wasn't learning English. It was trusting that slow growth still counts. Modern culture teaches us to measure success loudly. Certificates, accents, speed. But neuroscience reminds us that the brain changes through repetition, emotion, and safety. The most important learning happens when no one is watching. Working 2 jobs didn't break me. It taught me endurance. Climate shock didn't defeat me. It taught me adaptation. Cultural gaps didn't isolate me. They taught me observation. Love under pressure didn't disappear. It deepened. And English didn't save me by becoming perfect. It saved me by becoming usable. Human. Mine. If you're listening to this and wondering whether it's worth continuing to learn, to love, to stay, let me answer honestly. Yes. But not because it gets easy. Because you get stronger in ways you don't notice until later. Hope is not the belief that everything will work out. Hope is the decision to act as if your effort still matters, even when the outcome is unclear. That decision, repeated daily, changes the brain, changes relationships, changes lives. I still believe in love, not as a fantasy, but as a practice. I believe in learning slowly, listening deeply, and speaking even when your voice shakes. I believe in marriages built through tired conversations and mutual forgiveness. I believe in families that stretch across languages and still hold. And most of all, I believe that if you're still here, still listening, still trying, you are already further than you think. Because hope doesn't need speed. It needs presence. And you're here. If you're still listening right now, it means something inside you hasn't given up. Not on English. Not on love. Not on the life you came here to build. Maybe you're working 2 jobs. Maybe your English still feels slow. Maybe you're tired of pretending you're fine. But here's the truth most people won't tell you. Slow progress is still progress, and staying is braver than starting. This channel exists for people like you. People who learn English through real stories, not pressure. People who want to train their ears like a native, without feeling stupid or rushed. People who still believe that love, family, and a better future are possible, even when life feels heavy. If this story resonated with you, don't let it end here. Subscribe to the channel for more slow, real-life English listening stories. Like the videos so YouTube knows this content helps real learners. Comment below, what part of this story felt like your life? New videos are coming. Stories about life in America, love under pressure, marriage, family, culture shock, and English that grows with you. Not against you. Remember, you don't need to be perfect to move forward. You just need to stay. And if you're still believing in love, you're exactly where you need to be. See you in the next story. Don't forget to subscribe.